my name is Dr. Tiffany Lamont from Lamont Wellness, and today I want to talk to you about something called the National Weight Control Registry. So in my practice as a physical therapist, nutritionist, and strength and conditioning specialist, I get a lot of questions about weight management, and there's so much information and misinformation that is out and available for the public that my patients often get really frustrated. So what I want to do today is I want to cover one source of information that I would consider to be fairly reputable, and I'm going to go through some of their findings. I'm also going to put in the description box below a link to this information in this website, as well as on their website they have all of the research that they've included into this information. And hopefully this not only helps you feel a little bit more empowered that you do have options, but also what I'm really looking to show is that the process of losing weight and maintaining weight loss is not only the primary concern, because patients come to me all the time, every single day, wanting to lose weight. My primary concern is that yes, there are many ways to lose weight and effectively get weight off. However, statistically, the probability of someone losing weight and keeping it off is really low. So what I'm looking to help people to do is to develop weight loss strategies that are long-term. So what I'm going to jump into today is some of the details of that study, and then we can discuss in some detail what that means for you. First thing I need to say is that this is for educational and entertainment purposes only, and that you should never use this as a substitute for proper medical advice for your unique condition. So, the National Weight Control Registry was developed in 1994, and it was developed by two PhDs. One was from Brown Medical School, and the other one was from University of Colorado. And I think they have 6 research assistants or other research staff that work with them at this point. And I'll just mention quickly give credit to the primary researchers. One is called Rena Wing and one is called James Hill. They're both PhDs. So this study is what we call a prospective study. And so what that means is that we are looking into the future. Now, when you're talking about research, and a whole nother video can be done about that, how you decide whether research is quality or not quality, there are a number of things that we look at. The gold standard is considered a prospective randomized case-controlled trial. I don't expect anyone that's watching this video to necessarily know what that means, but we are talking about a study that is being conducted into the future. So what is an important subject for this study as well is that the subject content or the subject number is very high. It's over 10,000 at this point. And what's important about that is the larger the subject sample size is, there's a couple of positives and negatives actually. So if you have a very large sample size, you may actually find something that is statistically significant but is not clinically significant. And again, that's sort of a subject matter for another day. However, when you have a really large sample size, you can also start to assume that you're extrapolating information from the population as a whole. So in this particular organization, what they're looking at is subjects that have lost at least 30 pounds of body weight and have maintained it for at least a year. Now, for a lot of you, you're gonna say, well, 30 pounds is not necessarily a lot of weight and a year is not a long time. But if we actually look at the data on this and we look at the range of subjects in this study, we have a much larger range. So I'm actually gonna look at a piece of paper so I don't get these statistics incorrect. So the range is from 30 to 300 pounds, and the time frame that this has been maintained is 1 to 66 years. So we're really looking at a group of people who have lost a substantial amount of weight and have successfully maintained that weight loss. So another little bit of statistics. Again, I'm gonna look at my paper just to make sure I get these totally correct. So the subject matter, this is something to keep in mind, it's 80% women and 20% men. So one of the things that you should know about that is that if the subject matter is so heavily weighted toward women, we can make more extraction or more extrapolation of this data toward a female patient population. Does that mean it doesn't apply to men? No, 20% of the 10,000 subjects are men, but that's just something for you to keep in mind. The average age of the women is 45, and their current body weight that they are maintaining is 145 pounds on average across the subjects. For the men, the average age is 49, and they're currently maintaining a body weight of 190 pounds across the average of the sample size of men. Now, the average pounds off, this is very important, is 66 pounds over 5.5 years. So that means that everyone in the sample of this study, the average of them have maintained at least 5.5 years, and they have lost an average of 66 pounds. So I have a number of patients that come to me that have, they're very concerned because they have a lot of weight to lose, and they're very frustrated by their history of having difficulty losing weight or maintaining that weight loss or yo-yoing up and down, and all of the health concerns that come along with a body weight that's above your ideal body weight, as well as the risk factors of yo-yoing up and down. So I feel like this information is really valuable. And what you're gonna find from the data that's been collected is you might find this partially empowering and partially frustrating, because people come to me and they want concrete answers. They want to know, eat this and this will happen. Give me this diet, write me this diet. And I really, really hesitate to do those things because it is not ideal for that individual. Every individual is different. What you thrive on when you eat, what your culture determines is appropriate food for you, what your morals and values and ethics determine is appropriate for you, vary from patient to patient. So for me to say everyone should eat these things is really not appropriate, and also is not supported by research. And that's, again, another subject matter for another video. But in this video, what I want to go through is some of the statistics of what people who have lost weight and kept it off in this particular study have done. So, and I'm gonna keep referencing the paper so that I get the actual percentages correct, as I talk about this all the time with my patients, and I always say, I think it's this percent, but I wanna get it exact today so they don't make any errors. Okay, 98% of the subjects, they changed their food intake. Now, what does that mean? That's a very vague statement. The answer is you don't know what that means. It can be different for everyone. Maybe some people did intermittent fasting. Maybe some people just started monitoring and reducing their portion sizes. Maybe some people used a program such as Weight Watchers, etc. Maybe some people started to change the way that they eat their meals or structure their meals. Maybe they reduced certain types of foods. Maybe people found out they had sensitivities and eliminated those foods. You don't know necessarily based on that data, but the bottom line is that almost 100% of them in some way had to change the way that they ate. Now, we don't know how extreme that was or how mild that was. Now, I will tell you, other research supports that smaller, more maintainable changes as opposed to radical overhauls of diets tend to be more successful in the long term. That said, there are many, many different successful strategies, but what I would take from this information is that you have to do something different if you want to see change. What is that saying? Continuing to do the same thing and expecting change is the definition of insanity. So what I tell my patients is we're looking for small change that is manageable over time, rather than completely eliminating entire food groups or completely overhauling everything that you do in the way that you eat. So we can have a more, further discussion about this in the future about what some of those strategies can be. And I've made some videos, some of the smaller strategies that I recommend. But the bottom line is you're gonna have to change the manner in which you eat in some way if you want to maintain the weight loss. The next thing is that 94% of them had to increase their activity. I don't think that this is shocking, and I also think it's important to mention, not necessarily from this study, but from research in general, that exercise, although it is so important, it is important for so many health metrics, it is not the primary source of weight management. Weight management primarily comes from dietary controls. Exercise has a factor in that. Depending on the research you look at, that can range from 10, 20%, something like that. But ultimately, exercise has many important values, but in terms of weight management, does not have the the emphasis that people would like for it to do. So basically, you cannot exercise your way out of really bad nutrition habits, and that's an important factor for you to remember. And so pretty much, again, all of them, 94% of them increase their activity. Another thing that's really interesting to know, that the primary source of exercise was walking. And so I think that is a really important piece of information. Again, in my profession, I advocate whatever exercise you're going to do safely without pain, and that is going to not only be, that you can stick to is really important. But walking, not for everyone. Not everyone can walk. Some people don't have legs, for example. However, almost everyone can walk, and it is an absolutely accessible exercise for most people. The other thing to know is that the amount of exercise that these people reported is a lot. And so when we look at some of the recommendations from the National Health Institute, et cetera, of what is a recommended amount of activity, to be fair, for these people, what they found is 90% of them had to exercise an hour a day. Now, it turns out, I think that they didn't specify if that was 7 days a week, 5 days a week, or if that walking was just accumulation of steps over the course of the day. It's not clear, but the bottom line is you need to move for at least an hour a day. And I think that is a really important factor for people to consider, because Americans in particular, we are very, very sedentary. We have a lot of seated jobs, and then we go from our seated jobs to our cars with a really long commute, and then we go and we sit at our house and eat, and then we go and sit on our couch and watch TV. Not everyone, of course, I'm making some generalizations, but this is part of the struggle of the American culture with obesity and weight management. Then the next thing that kind of is a good segue, 62% of them watched less than 10 hours of television per week. Now, I think that this is I don't know if this is clarified into screen time. I would assume probably not, because most people are on their computers for work more than 10 hours a week, but this is really something to take into consideration. So they mentioned specifically television. I personally would include in that any sort of screen time, leisure screen time. So whether that's scanning through your phone, scanning through your iPad, watching television, watching movies, these are all very sedentary activities. Although there are some tips that we can come up with where if you decide you want to watch some television, we can incorporate in some stretching activities, say in the commercial breaks, or that you can set up a bike and you can only watch television when you're riding your bike. There are some tips in that regard, but overall it's important to note that most of the people in this study watch less than 10 hours of television per week. And then another good one, I really like this, and this is something that I personally struggle with, is 78% of them ate breakfast. Now, I am not a big breakfast eater. There's a couple of reasons for that. One, I can't eat gluten or pork, and a lot of breakfast foods include both of those. And also, I just don't tend to be super hungry in the morning. But I'm never about force feeding myself to eat when I don't feel the need to eat. I attest to a little bit more intuitive eating than that. However, I do think that breakfast, and there is some research to support that breakfast can be a really important meal, and for some people it's extremely important. It's maybe their most important meal of the day. That said, most of the people in this study lost weight if they included breakfast. And the last thing that I want to mention from this particular study is that 75% of them weighed themselves at least once a week. Lots of controversy are surrounding weighing yourself, because people can have issues with eating disorders where they're weight obsessed, or they can have issues of self-worth that are tied to what the scale says. And this is how I like to, as a general rule, with exceptions, I like to approach the subject with my patients. One, it is one metric. It is a tool that you can use to monitor your weight management. I have a video that I've done before on something that I like to call a bump weight. So your body weight will fluctuate within a certain amount just by hydration, whether or not you've had a bowel movement, if it's the beginning of the day or the end of the day, if you are during your menstrual cycle or not. There's a certain amount of range of fluctuation that is completely normal. And if you are stuck on a very specific pound number, you're going to run into some difficulty with coping, if you will, or some obsessive behaviors. So there's a couple things that I can suggest with a scale. One, in order to create some consistency, because you're basically doing a case study on yourself. So to create some consistency, when you weigh yourself, do it in the same way. So what I mean by that is do it in the morning, after urination, nude. That way you have at least controlled some of the variables, and you can do it and do it on the same scale. That's the other thing. Switching scales, there is some variability from one scale to the next. So if you weigh yourself at the gym with all your clothes on and you weigh yourself at home naked in the morning, you may see a 4 or 5 pound difference, and you might find that very discouraging. But in the reality, there hasn't been a change. You're just using different variables. And to be fair, that's just bad research. So if you're doing research on yourself, you need to have some consistency. The other thing is I tell people, don't weigh yourself for sure more than once per day. That would be a maximum. For some people it's less, some people it's once a month. Some people, they use their clothing, and I call it their size-wise clothing. They might have a very specific pair of pants that they put on once a week to make sure that they still fit them or they're not getting snug. Or if they're getting really loose and they feel like they're being too restrictive with their diet, they give themselves some leniency. Find a system that works for you. But just to reiterate that in this particular study, 75% of the people weigh themselves at least once a week. Now, to kind of wrap this information up, this is not meant to be an exhaustive list of ways to manage your weight, but it is one very well done source of information. I like the fact that it has a very large sample size. I like the fact that they've tracked people over a very extended period of time, which is really important for weight management. I like the fact that they've looked at a number of different metrics, and they have been able to find what people who maintain their weight loss do on a fairly consistent basis. Now, what it doesn't do is it doesn't tell you exactly how to do it. It's not going to tell you what exercise to do. It's not going to tell you what to eat or what dietary program to follow. I think that actually brings me to one other statistic that's maybe worth mentioning, is that 45% of the participants did their weight loss entirely on their own. And 55% of the participants followed some sort of program. Now that program can be any program. And if you've had a weight management challenge, then you know the list of suggestions and people that are telling you what to eat, what to not to eat, what diet to follow, cut this food out, combine these foods, it's endless. It's very frustrating, and it's exhausting to try and figure that out. But here's the good news. About half of these people did it with no structured program at all. So you don't necessarily have to go that route. So, in conclusion, first things first, weight management over the long term is really what is more important. There is some research to support that actually your weight going down and back up and gaining, or that fluctuation, is more dangerous than maintaining the weight that you're at. That said, even modest amounts of weight loss have been associated with significant improvement in health metrics, such as 10% of your body weight have been found to be highly associated with improvements in things like blood pressure, cholesterol levels, insulin resistance, health metrics that are very important when it comes to the concept of weight management. So, these people have had really great successes. So these aren't people that have lost 5 or 10 pounds. These are people who have lost a significant portion of weight. So, but the information, I think, is fair to extrapolate to all populations. You can extrapolate this to someone who has a modest amount of weight to lose. It also gives you freedom. There is freedom in knowing that there is not one right way. It might be frustrating because it feels like there's too many choices, but there's also freedom in knowing that you can find your own path. But you have to be able to make change, you have to be able to do it consistently, and it has to be something that you can maintain over the long term. So keep those things in mind when you start looking at different programs that, suggest that you cut out entire food groups, like entire food groups of carbohydrates or entire food groups of fat, or if they suggest that they vilify very specific types of food. The thing is all of those programs will show weight loss in the short term, but rarely do they show weight loss in the long term, and that's really ultimately the goal. So thank you for coming to today's video. If you have any suggestions for future videos, or you have any comments or questions, please include those in the description or not in the comments below. And then I will include this study in the description box so that everyone can have access and look that up for themselves. Thank you so much.